Hello everybody, it's Jen, Scrapbena Creations. I'm here with 5 cards using the May 2019 Simon Says stamp card kit called Delicate Flowers. So here's the first card I'm going to be making today. Let's jump right into it. So for the first card, I'm using a couple of the alcohol pearl inks that came in the kit this month. This was my first time playing with the alcohol inks and I had a lot of fun. I don't have a fancy multimedia mat, so I'm just using a shipping box here to contain any of the mess that might happen. So I'm just adding on the alcohol clear ink as well as some of the blue and the green color. You can see here as I edit it out in between that the color moves by itself, which is kind of fun. Now, how you choose to do your backgrounds with your alcohol inks are totally up to you. I do like having a bit of white space, so I made sure to leave some white space in my creations with the alcohol pearl inks. So for this first card, I just cut down that Yupo paper. That was the Yupo paper that came in the card kit. I decided to go ahead and round 2 of the corners for this card. All of my cards today will be standard A2 size cards at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I went ahead and I also rounded the corners on my card base as well. Just use some liquid glue to adhere that on. I'm going to use my cutter bee scissors here just to trim up where I didn't quite get that evenly onto the card base. And now I'm going to go ahead and create the first card. So I did go ahead and color this up off screen. The first card that I used with this kit was a Mother's Day card, and I did have the coloring in that video, so I will link to that video in case you want to see how I colored this particular flower. But to save time on this video, I did go ahead and color this one before I started filming. So I'm using a stitched circle panel here that I cut out using one of my dies just to give a little bit of backing to that flower so you could see it in front of that busy alcohol ink background. For the sentiment for this card, I'm stamping out the one that says "You are so special to me" on some Simon Says stamp black cardstock, and I'm going to white heat emboss that. I went ahead and I popped up the flower on some fun foam. I'm just going to trim the sentiment down here. I wanted it to be fairly skinny, so I'm just using my old school Creative Memories trimmer here. It's nice and tiny and fits easily in screen while I'm filming. I've had this for decades and it still works like new. So I went ahead and I added some of the leaves behind the flower. You could see there I did trim off one leaf that I knew wasn't going to be seen. I'm going to keep that and I'm going to add that somewhere on the card. I don't want to waste that, seeing I took the time to color that with my Copic markers. So now that I'm ready to get my sentiment down, I'm going to adhere my little panel here, my focal point, onto the card base, again just using some liquid glue. The leaves themselves are not popped up on foam adhesive, just the flower. I'm going to adhere the sentiment kind of overlapping onto the flower and realized I needed to add some foam adhesive to that right hand side so that it will be the same level as the flower. Once I get that down, I'm going to place that lonely little leaf that I cut off to the bottom right hand side, and that will just finish off that card nicely. I'm just going to trim off that stem so I can tuck it underneath the flower, and it will look like it was meant to be there the entire time and not like it's an additional piece that I put on myself. To finish off this card, I'm going to use my Nuvo glitter shimmer pen here and add some sparkle to the flower, which will match the pearlescent shine in the alcohol pearls that we used for the background. Moving on to card number 2, this was a very simple card given I loved the look of the alcohol ink background for this one. So for this one I'm using the blue and the pink color. So there were 3 different colors in the kit. There was the green, the blue, and the pink. And of course, once you mix the pink and the blue here, you will get some purple color, which is really pretty. I am using gloves in this video only because I played around one night before filming just so I could get a sense of how these work, and I got ink all over my fingers, and I didn't think you'd want to see inky fingers in my video, so I just put on a pair of rubber gloves here, and that keeps it off my hands and makes it a bit easier for filming. So in between the layers, I do bring out my heat tool here, and you'll see, like I said with the first one, as I kind of edit through this part of creating the background, you can see how the alcohol inks themselves move and create kind of their own look. So you can't really get the same look twice with these just because of the properties in them and the way they move around with each other. So again, I went ahead and I cut that panel into 2 pieces. For the second card, I'm using the sentiment that says "You're amazing." Again, heat emboss that on some black Simon Says stamp cardstock with some white embossing powder. Just going to trim this one down with my scissors because I wanted it to be fairly thin. I'm going to go ahead and adhere this panel onto my card base, just using some liquid glue to give me a little bit of wiggle room in case I don't get it down the way I want it the first time. I just love the way that background looks with the white popping out. So I did cheat a little bit on this card. I'm bringing in the Simon Says Stamp Painted Thanks die, and I cut this out of the beautiful Ranger silver glitter paper that came in the kit, which you can use with the alcohol pearls, but I loved it on its own. It's got a great shimmer and shine, and the glitter doesn't come off, so it's perfect if you're one of those people that does not like glitter. So I went ahead and I adhered that right down on to my card panel there, and then I'm going to tuck the "You're amazing" right under the thanks. So it says "Thanks, you're amazing." And anything outside of the kit that I use will be linked in the description box below in case you're interested. Moving on to card number 3, I really wanted to use some of this beautiful pattern paper that was included in the kit. So I'm using Hero Arts Infinity. These are the rounded rectangles. And I'm just going to cut out a panel with the butterfly paper. And then I'm using some of the pink, it's almost a marble look paper that came in the kit, and I'm using my Hippo Lawn Fawn ink for that. I didn't want to use black because I wanted it to be much softer than what black ink would give me. So I cut that out with a circle die, and I'm going to place that down on the left hand corner. Now that little pink circle that I stamped my sentiment on, which reads "Love everything about you," is actually left over from the background panel that I'm going to use for this card. First, I'm going to add some fun foam to the back of this panel. I just cut it out using the same die that I did for the pattern paper, and then I'm just going to trim around it so that it doesn't go right to the edge and you don't risk seeing it once it's on the card base. I'm going to add some double-sided adhesive to that. This is my adhesive of preference when using fun foam. And here's that pattern paper that I was talking about where I just used the cutoff portion for my sentiment. So this is a very clean and simple card. Once I got this down, I thought that this was going to be the completion of this card, but then once I saw it, I realized it needed a little bit something else. So I went ahead and looked at the other pattern papers, and there was a larger butterfly here in this pattern paper. So I went ahead and I fussy cut that out, and I'm going to add that to the left hand side, the left top side of the sentiment circle. So I'm just going to trim around that really carefully with my scissors. I'm going to add some fun foam just to the center of the butterfly, and then I'm going to curl up the wings there a little bit to give it some added dimension, and I'll adhere that right over the L and the O of the love in our sentiment. And that will finish off that card. So moving on to card number 4, I think in the end this was my favorite card. Don't forget to let me know which card was your favorite. So I took that piece of paper that I'd cut the butterfly out, and I went ahead and I cut out the leaves and the flowers. I used another piece of pattern paper as well that had some of the larger images and fussy cut those out. So I'm going to create a very soft background here. I'm using Gathered Twigs Distress Oxide with my makeup brushes just to give a little bit of a soft, elegant background to this card. And I went ahead and I added foam adhesive to all of the flowers here because I wanted some dimension on the card. Seeing this is pretty clean and simple given it's just images cut out of the pattern paper. So I'm just doing a test run here trying to figure out where I might want all these images to go. Now you may have noticed that some of the images are kind of cut like this one where there's a straight edge because of the way it was laid out in the pattern paper. So to fix that, I'm just going to layer some other elements over top of that. I want there to be nice spacing between the orangey color flowers and the pink color flowers. So I'm just trying to figure out where I want all these to go. And really, it's just a matter of playing with them a little bit and putting them down where you want to put them down. It was kind of hard to cut into the beautiful pattern paper, but I really love how this card turned out in the end. So just going to add on these last few here. You could definitely add some highlights to these flowers if you wanted to embellish them a little bit more. You could add some white gel pen detailing. You could add some Nouveau Morning Dew drops, which are a clear finish, or even something with a color or sparkle in them. And it would look really pretty, but I loved the simplicity of the paper with this card. So once I get that into place, I'm going to add these two little branches to either side of our central kind of cluster of flowers, and then I'm going to add in a few of the leaves that I also fussy cut out of the pattern paper. And I love how this just draws the eye from the top left all the way down to the bottom right. I am going to have to trim off one of the stems, and it's really easy to do, but sometimes that foam adhesive can get in the way. So you'll see here with one of those little branches, I do have to cut it down so that I can stick it behind the flowers. So really fun, easy technique to use up some of your pattern paper if you have a bunch in your stash. This, I think, just makes a really elegant card with little effort. I mean, the time that it takes in this card is the fussy cutting and then just trying to arrange the elements into a position that you want them. So now that I have everything in place, I just need to add a little bit of glue where some of those are lifting up on top of each other. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stamp the sentiment. The sentiment that I'm using for this card comes on the Delicate Flowers stamp set, and I'm just going to stamp out Miss You using my Versafine Clair black ink. This is definitely my ink of choice now for sentiments. It never disappoints. It gives a clean, crisp image on the first stamp, so you don't have to worry about using a stamping tool with that ink. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to adhere this to the card base. Then I'll give you a close-up of the card and we'll move on to card number 5, the final card in this video. So here's the close-up. For card number 5, I'm going to do some watercoloring using some distress inks. First, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stamp my images onto my paper. I'm using some Tim Holtz Distress watercolor paper, and I'm using the Versafine Clair ink. Again, this is a waterproof ink. So I'm going to mask my images after I stamp them, and then I'm going to continue to stamp the flowers up the left-hand side of the card panel. So I'm going to use 2 of the flower that I used first, and then I'm going to have this larger flower image in the middle. So I've gone ahead and I've laid my masks down. I use the Simon Says Stamp masking paper, which I absolutely love. It sticks really nicely and it is easy to peel up and does not ruin your card bases at all. So I thought I would add some greenery here to the flowers. So I'm using this really pretty branch of leaves that comes in the stamp set. I don't have to worry about masking those because I'm not going to be stamping over top of them. But I am going to stamp this image 3 times. So once in the top left, once in the bottom left, and then one more to the right hand side of that bottom flower. You'll see here I do mess up a little. I didn't let my stamp dry all the way, so my stamp chamois was a little bit more wet than I would have liked it to be, so it did leave a little bit of residue. I don't know if you can see that on camera or not, but you can definitely see it here. I'm pointing it out. So I am going to have to go in and stamp that because it doesn't look very pretty. So I'm going to try to fix that, and there's a little spot under the flower still, but I'm not too worried about that. I'm going to end up covering that once I start my watercoloring. I'm just going to use my craft pick here to peel up the masks. You can see how easy they come up to reveal the beautiful work that we did with all this stamping. In the end, I did decide that I wanted to try to fix that little smudge that I have. So I'm just going to use my stamp block here, and I'm going to do this freehand. So I'm going to rub away some of the ink off of the stamp so that I don't make more of a mess, and then I'm going to stamp over top of that smudge, and any imperfection will be covered up by the Distress ink once I start painting. So for the Distress inks, I'm using pine needles and bundled sage for the leaves. Now that white piece of paper to the right is a laminated piece of cardstock. I find this an inexpensive way to be able to watercolor, to lay down your inks without having to invest in a high quality mixed media mat if you don't have one and you already have a laminator for your crafting needs. So I went ahead and I stamped the inks out onto the laminated cardstock. I added some water there with my Distress sprayer. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my Ranger paintbrushes. These paintbrushes, if you're new to my channel and you haven't seen me use them, these are by Ranger. They come with like 6 or so in a set, and they're only about $5, and they work great. I can't recommend them highly enough. So as I lay on the color, I do bring my heat tool in and just dry that as I go. I'm going to add a couple layers with this, and you can see here that I'm going for a messy watercolor look, so I am bringing that color outside of the lines. I feel like this just gives it a really soft, feminine, romantic kind of feel. So I'm just going to go ahead and add in some more of that bundled sage. I didn't like how green it looked. The pine needles kind of overtook the first layer of the bundled sage, but that's the great thing about Distress inks, is you can go ahead and layer over top of them and get the color that you're going for. So I'm going to add in a little bit of the pine needles some more, and I'm just touching it to the paper, and I'm really letting the water kind of move that color around. Once I get the leaves done, I'm going to move on to the flowers, and for the flowers I'm using Victorian Velvet, which is the lighter color, and Aged Mahogany, and I'm just going to go in first with the Victorian Velvet and lay that color down. I am adding clean water before I lay down any of the ink, and this will just help it move, and you can see I'm just adding this color very loosely. So this is a really nice way to relieve some stress. You don't have to worry about coloring within the lines. You can really just let the water do the work for you. It's also a fairly quick technique, so if you need to make a card quickly. This is also one of those great techniques that you can use to do that and achieve a really beautiful watercolored card. So I went ahead and I used my heat tool with that as well, and here now I'm going to bring in the aged mahogany and I'm going to darken up that flower a little bit. I'm trying to darken it up in the centers and then where the petals kind of overlap each other. There would be natural shadows there, so I just want to try to get some darker colors in that area, but again, I'm not too worried about shading and shadows and light sources for this card. I'm really just painting and letting the water do the work for me. Once I finished up the flowers, I was trying to figure out what color I wanted to do these centers. So in the end, I chose yellow, which I have to admit I don't love, and I was pretty heavy-handed with it, so I didn't really love the way the centers came out, but it is what it is. So for the yellow, I am using Fossilized Amber, and at first it was really nice and pale, and I should have let it dry because it would have dried back lighter as well. But then I just kept adding more and more and more, and now I sort of feel like the center of the flowers are what's standing out and not the flowers themselves. So if I were to do this card again, I would do that a little bit differently. Now, because I did some watercoloring and some heating to dry my panel, I did go ahead and add some double-sided tape to the back of this card panel, and it lays flat on the card base when you do that. So for the sentiment, I'm stamping "You Are Beautiful to Me," and I'm just going to kind of nudge it into where there's that natural indent in the two flowers, just tucking it in there, and I think that finishes it off nicely. For the centers, because I wanted to try to bring back that color, I did add some Nouveau drops in White Blizzard. These have some glitter in them and are really pretty, and it will also give a raised effect. So that is card number 5. I'm going to slow this down a little bit, and I'm going to show you all 5 cards that I made using the May 2019 Simon Says Stamp Card Kit. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please make sure to subscribe so you can see more videos from me. Thanks everyone for your comments, and I will see you really soon in my next video. Take care, everybody. Bye.